In Vaughan, 2 dead after a shooting in a packed banquet hall. Pieces of clothing left behind as people rushed to escape. Good evening, I'm Marivel Tarouk. Investigators are now trying to piece together exactly what happened in that fatal shooting. Hours later, police remain at the Dream Palace banquet hall. Our Kelda Yoon is there tonight too. Kelda, no arrests made yet?
That's right, Marivel, no arrests, and police have not released information on any potential suspects. They have also not revealed the identities of the victims, but we do know that they are 2 men in their 20s. Now, the scene here, it's still very active. The entire plaza is still taped off. Now, the coroner left hours ago, but homicide investigators, they're still at the scene. They're here gathering evidence. Now, going back hours ago, police were called to the scene at around 4:15 in the morning after several people reported hearing gunshots. When they arrived, they found 1 man inside suffering from gunshot wounds. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The other man was found outside, shot in the legs, and he died later in hospital. Police say a gun has not been recovered. Police also say some people were scrambling to get out of the banquet hall when they arrived, and they did say that there is a possibility that others may have been injured. They have just not come forward. This is an industrial area, and there are numerous businesses around, but of course, none of the business owners were here at the scene at 4 a.m. in the morning when the shooting occurred. Now, I did talk to one business owner who owned a plumbing business very close by. Now, he says a husband and wife opened the banquet hall about a year ago and rented it out to functions. He says once a month he'll see a promotion for a big party here. But he says in his 15 years here at his business, he has never seen anything like this.
It's a pretty quiet place. It's heavily patrolled by the police, right? There's police around here all the time, so I feel safe. To hear of anything like this, I have never heard anything like this. I know it happens, but this time it happened too close to us. So I feel bad. I feel terrible for 2 young people who are gone.
Police say they are trying to obtain surveillance video, but Altieri, the business owner you just heard from, he said that all the cameras are in this plaza are at the back of the businesses, and all of them were broken during the summer during roofing work. He says the only functioning surveillance camera is actually at the front of the banquet hall. Now, we tried to reach out to the owners of the banquet hall, but we weren't able to reach them. And meanwhile, police are also appealing to anyone who fled the scene to come forward. They'd like to speak to them as well. Marivel.
All right, Kelda, thank you. An 18-year-old woman in Ottawa has been charged with second-degree murder after her mother went missing earlier this month. 37-year-old Susan Kublu-Ikituk was last seen by her family on January 11th. Police had been asking for the public's help in locating her since Thursday. Her daughter, Linez Kublu, was also reported missing earlier this month, but police said later that she was accounted for. She now faces a second-degree murder charge and indignity to a human body in connection with her mother's disappearance. She appeared in court this morning. Big questions remain after whirlwind anti-terror raids in Kingston earlier this week. The RCMP says it all started with a tip from the FBI. Then, weeks of surveillance brought them to 2 Kingston homes. 2 people were arrested, one an unnamed youth now charged with terror-related offenses. The second, 20-year-old Hussam Edin Alazabi, was released without charge. Now, his lawyer says he is left to deal with the turbulent aftermath.
He's got to pick up the pieces and deal with the consequences of what has been done. And the investigation is one thing, but as I said, he's got to deal now with the consequences to his life for being tarnished and sort of being associated with something like this.
Alazabi is not the only one struggling to come to grips with this investigation. The community of Kingston is also reeling. Local leaders organized an event to pick up the pieces together. CBC's.
It has all the appearances of a normal Saturday after 2 days in Kingston that were anything but normal.
The vision there was definitely to bring a number of different community leaders together so that we can ensure that in the aftermath of something like this, that our community pulls together and doesn't tear apart.
The arrest of 20-year-old Hussam al-Zahabi has put a special focus on the immigrant community. Police arrested him and raided his family home, but he was later released without charge or explanation.
I think it's important to note that Hassan maintains his innocence and will continue to cooperate through myself and through other means.
But there is concern of a backlash. The Al-Zahabis are Syrian refugees.
For the Muslim community, I think they should they should feel that the community at large is with them.
The police are trying to send that message. In the hours before this press briefing on the arrest, they met with Muslim leaders and immigrant support groups to offer support and reassurance.
I think everyone's reeling from it. Of course, there's always the odd negative comment on social media. And again, I would urge the community at large to be really cautious and exercise caution and be sensitive towards what we say.
So while Kingston's leaders try to hold things together, the legal system is going to work. The teenage boy charged in this bomb plot made a brief court appearance on Friday. He's due back in court on Monday. David Cochran, CBC News, Kingston.
To some developing news now, John McCallum is no longer Canada's ambassador to China. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he asked for and accepted McCallum's resignation last night. And all this comes at a time when Canada and China are embroiled in a diplomatic standoff. Katie Simpson has more from Ottawa.
Did you offer your resignation to the Prime Minister?
John McCallum had been under pressure to quit ever since he publicly weighed in on the legal case against Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. He advocated for her release on Tuesday during a news conference with mostly Chinese media outlets just outside of Toronto. After his comments picked up traction, he was forced to issue an apology, claiming that he misspoke. But on Friday, when asked by reporters from the Toronto Star about the case again, he again offered an opinion. By Friday night, it seems the Prime Minister had had enough and McCallum was fired. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer says this should have happened sooner.
As soon as his ambassador sent that message and then contradicted himself, and then days later sent a different message.
The firing comes in the middle of a diplomatic crisis between Canada and China. After Canada arrested Meng at the request of the U.S., China retaliated, arbitrarily arresting 2 Canadians while sentencing a third to death over drug charges. Canada has been trying to get support of international allies to pressure China to release the Canadians, but McCallum's comments were seen as undermining the government's position. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Ottawa.
Former Liberal MP Raj Grewal says he will be staying on as a Member of Parliament for Brampton East. Last November, he announced he was taking leave to deal with what he called a compulsive gambling problem. But now he says he will continue to sit in the House of Commons. He announced his intentions in a Facebook post last night, saying, "Over the past 2 months, I have taken some time away to focus on my health and receive appropriate treatment. Throughout this time, I also received countless calls and messages from constituents offering their support and encouraging me to continue to serve. It is for these reasons that I have decided to remain as a Member of Parliament for Brampton East." Well, we certainly feel like we are now in the full grips of winter. Let's check in with Sophia for how it's going to feel for the rest of the weekend. Hi.
Well, I am not going to be the bearer of very good news for the rest of the weekend and as we head into really the entirety of the work week. Where should we start, folks? Should we start with the still frigid temperatures or the little dose of snow we're going to get overnight? Both will be a precursor to more of the same for the work weeks. That is a take-home message. Feeling like minus 13 overnight, but look at the cold in the north. Folks, it's coming down our way, but first we have some snow to deal with. Overnight tonight, everybody sees about 2 to 5 centimeters, a little bit more if you're St. Catharines, Niagara, or that Cobourg to Kingston stretch. Along the 401, it's a quick dusting. It's whetting the appetite throughout the overnight for the bigger and more significant messy system with persistent bands of snow to come Monday afternoon on our doorstep. By Monday evening, when you are in the thick of the commute, it will be at its heaviest. We'll talk about some of the areas that could be hit the hardest, and it won't clear until Tuesday Tuesday morning. So you are seeing snow throughout Monday, 10 to 20 centimeters, not out of the question. We'll talk who's going to get the most when we return.
Okay, we'll see you in a few. Thanks, Sophia.
Sounds good.
The federal government announced it is giving Toronto $15 million to help address the mounting demand on shelters. Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada acknowledges affordable temporary housing has been a key challenge in Toronto, but the department says waves of refugees and asylum seekers have put the system under greater strain over the past year. As CBC's Talia Ricci reports, advocates say the shelters were facing pressure well before that.
Amid extreme cold warnings and advocates calling on Mayor John Tory to declare homelessness a state of emergency, $15 million is now in the city's hands to help alleviate the overflow at shelters.
We expect some $45 million in 2019 to look after refugees, and we hope as we house them and as the trickle across the border slows down that those numbers will decrease, because they're presently occupying 40% of our shelter space.
But the reason attached to that funding isn't sitting well with some of those who work on the front lines. Both the federal government and the city saying the wave of refugee and asylum claimants is a big contributor to this pressure. Rafi Aaron says these issues are separate.
There has been a shelter crisis in Toronto's shelter system for the last decade.
Aaron says he's seen the same people in the city's shelter system for years, and that refugees aren't staying in these shelters, they're in motels.
The issue here is that the city continuously expanded the emergency component of its shelter system, and the moment you do that, you're in trouble.
Ottawa says the provincial governments are still best placed to distribute funding for housing pressures, and it wants to see a cost-sharing agreement with Ontario. Provincial Minister Lisa MacLeod disputes that.
We would like 100%. They created the failed border policy. They should be paying for it. At $50 million today, drop in the bucket, and it ignores and bypasses the city of Ottawa, who's also got a shelter crisis.
I am happy the federal government has come forward with some help, but we need more in 2019.
This funding comes on top of the $11 million provided to the city last year, and advocates say they'll be back at City Hall next week, calling on the city to declare a state of emergency for Toronto's housing and shelter crisis, and also asking the city to consider building more social housing on city-owned land. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Scarborough Town Centre hosted some Lunar New Year celebrations today.
We're celebrating here today the Lunar New Year because it goes beyond Chinese. You know, we have Koreans, we have Vietnamese, we have many different diversity. And it's a year of the renewal. So everybody comes here to buy new clothes and just to celebrate, make wishes, just to start the new year in a really, really fun way.
The most popular and important part of the celebration is the lion dance. The Asian community tradition believes that the lion's momentum can sweep away the worries of the past year and bring good luck to the new year. We'll be right back. More than 30 people are confirmed dead and about 300 people are still missing after a mudslide at a mining site in Brazil. A dam collapsed, flooding the area with millions of tons of mining waste. It's owned by mining giant Vale, a company that also operates in Canada. As Lorenda Redekop reports, some family members are losing hope they will ever see their loved ones again.
It's a huge path of mud and sludge. A dam burst at an iron ore mine, sending debris rushing out across the rural area, covering homes and vehicles. There have been some dramatic rescues, pulling people to safety from the thick mud. Among those people missing, more than 100 mining workers who were eating lunch in the cafeteria. Now into day 2, family members fear the worst. This man's brother only started work there a month ago. I don't think there's any hope, he says. They will hardly be able to find any bodies there. Many won't have their children, parents, or brothers to bury. That's the reality. Today, Brazil's Environmental Protection Agency fined Vale the equivalent of $87 million Canadian, and that's just an initial amount. The company says all the missing are Vale's staff or contractors. It is a human tragedy, its CEO says. We don't know how many there are, but we know it will be a large number of victims. It's not clear what caused the dam to burst. It was being decommissioned, but the company says testing 2 weeks earlier found it safe. It's just over 3 years since another mining disaster in Brazil. A dam burst at a mine partly owned by Vale, killing 19 people. Here in Canada, 2 Vale employees died buried by mud in 2011 when a mine in Sudbury flooded. A court fined the company $1 million for not dealing with earlier water issues. Today, Brazil's president arrived in the area to get his own aerial view of the disaster zone. Residents trying to recover say vegetation has been completely wiped out. The search effort continues, with the number of those killed expected to rise sharply. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Venezuela's dueling presidents found out today who supports them and who doesn't. The UN Security Council held a meeting to discuss the growing crisis there. Country after country used the meeting to pick a side in the debate over who really won the right to lead Venezuela. Melissa Kent has more from UN headquarters in New York.
Before it even started, Russia called for and lost a procedural vote to block today's meeting requested by the United States.
We regret that in this unethical ploys, the United States is involving the Security Council.
The question at the heart of today's debate: who is the president of Venezuela? Incumbent Nicolas Maduro or opposition leader Juan Guaido?
The United States stands with the Venezuelan people.
Washington's aim, clear.
Either you stand with the forces of freedom, or you're in league with Maduro and his mayhem.
One by one, they did speak up, exposing the geopolitical fault lines.
The presidency of Nicolas Maduro is not legitimate.
Nicolas Maduro, who sought to take on a second mandate on the basis of a travesty of an election, must immediately announce the organization of new presidential elections.
Europe is giving us 8 days. 8 days. Where do you get that you have the power to establish a deadline or an ultimatum to a sovereign people?
Peru alone has received to date some 700,000 refugees, and I wish to repeat that figure: 700,000.
Let's be crystal clear. The foreign power meddling in Venezuela today is Cuba.
The main threat to peace and security in Latin America and the Caribbean is, in fact, the bullying by the United States and its allies of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
How can there be any doubt that an actual movement of more than 3 million refugees and potentially 5.3 million soon does not constitute a threat to regional security?
U.S. presidents call for war when they are facing problems, domestic problems.
Pompeo had already left the chamber by the time Venezuela spoke. The meeting went on for several more hours, filled with accusations and acrimony, but no plan for a peaceful way forward to end the crisis being faced by the people of Venezuela. Melissa Kent, CBC News at the United Nations in New York.
It's a live look for you at the Toronto skyline, around -9 out there, partly cloudy. We will have your long-range weather forecast after the break. Canadian animator Domi Shi is having quite a week. Her film Bao has been nominated for an Oscar in the animated short category. Yelena Adzik has more on Shi's reaction to the nomination.
The Oscar nomination for the short film Bao is significant for several reasons. Firstly, Bao is directed by Domi Shi, and it's Pixar's first ever female-directed short. And that's in a year when not a single nomination among the Best Pick and the Best Director nominees includes a film directed by a woman. Okay, so secondly, the film highlights the not often covered Asian immigrant experience. Director Domi Shi leaned on her upbringing in Toronto's Chinese community to tell this tale of a complicated mother and son relationship. The son just happens to be a steamed dumpling. Listen as Domi Shi shares the significance of her telling her community's story.
I feel just so happy that I could represent so many groups and like so many parts of of my background and of me, like being Chinese, also being Canadian, also like being a young female director. I hope I can represent everybody.
Now, this week we learned of 2 other Canadian nominations in the same category of Best Animated Short. One is called Animal Behavior by the husband and wife filmmaking team of David Fine and Allison Snowden. This movie asks, with a smile, what would happen if a bunch of animals went to group therapy together? So whether you like weekends or animal behavior, or would prefer to stick by the side of a little bun named Bao, there are plenty of options for Canadians to root for when it comes to this year's Best Animated Short Oscar category. Yelena Adzik, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, we were warned we need shovels at the ready this week. Sophia, lots of snow on the way.
Yeah, lots of snow, a significant swath, potentially 10 to maybe even up to 20 centimeters. And the difference being with this system, currently about to wreak havoc in the prairies that will come barreling through our neck of the woods, being kind of like a Monday into Tuesday, a 24-hour event. It differs from the last big system we had that really just kind of hammered Hamilton. This one will be felt more widespread for many population centers across the GTA, really from Burlington all the way to the city of Toronto especially. And it will also be coming during the thick of the afternoon commute on Monday, while the last one we had was more of a weekend story. So many of you will be on the roads for the thick of this. And then it will be followed by the coldest air we have seen yet this season. The polar vortex is back in our vocabulary. And you see how far south that blue line went? That was the freezing line, the 0-degree line. It's, you know, way down there in the States. We're talking a lot of bitter, cool air. Let's give you the timing of this next big system, and we'll tell you who can see what and who will see more than others. Monday morning, this system is just coming into southwestern Ontario. By the afternoon, it's into the GTA. By the evening, when you are commuting, the heaviest snow will be coming down, and that's when those of you in the Niagara region have a chance at a brief switch over to some freezing rain or even some rain before back to snow for everybody right into the overnight period. And then for those of you anywhere really from Burlington to Toronto, watch as an east wind picks up right during the heaviest of snow. That's where those of you, especially closer to lake shores, could see that 10 to even 20 centimeters. Really quickly want to show you the absolute frigid temperatures we have coming up for the rest of the week. We're talking what feels like the minus 30s. Bundle up, folks.
Parkas and shovels. Thanks, Sophia.
Good luck.
And that's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching, everyone. We're going to leave you with another look at the Lunar New Year celebrations at Scarborough Town Centre today. Have a great night, everyone.